Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Hello, my friends, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we are going to do what is called a knowing what I now know analysis, or KWINK for short. We're going to talk about a way to look at where we are, where we've come from, with a lens of kindness and reflection on where we have been and where we would like to go. So I hope that this will be useful, practical, validating, and we're going to let go of a little bit of that tendency towards self-shame, self-judgment that so many of us wrestle with. So knowing what I now know, or KWINK as it's called, I believe comes from Brian Tracy, who is a business and leadership expert. I tried super quickly to just fact check that that was the source. And then I remembered, you know what? I'm not giving a medical presentation. I am not writing a paper. So I think that's the source. We're going to call that good enough. But this is a business tool that is useful for looking at where we are now, again, with a lens of self-kindness and self-compassion. So let's start with this. How often have you found yourself asking yourself, why did I do that? Or saying, I shouldn't have done that. And immediately falling into this self-blame, beating yourself up, right? This judgment state. I know all the hands are going up right now, even though I can't see you. I know who you are. I know how you think, right? Me too. It's so easy for us to take ourselves into this place of judgment and shame. And this is, again, one of those areas where if you didn't struggle with this before you went into medical school, I can pretty much guarantee that you picked this up along the way. One of the things that happens to us in medical training is that we get yelled at enough times for making a stupid mistake. How dare you? That kind of thing, right? When we think back to being medical students or residents during rounding in the hospital. Now, I hope that fewer and fewer people have had that experience, right? Of being pimped, being questioned aggressively, of being publicly shamed or humiliated for a judgment that you made or having a wrong answer or not being able to answer a question. But that is the culture of medicine that has persisted for such a long time. Shout out to one of my clients who will remain unnamed, but is as deeply loved for this. She mentioned recently in one of our group conversations that she realized at one point where she was in a moment of self-judgment that it was the old white man in her head who was yelling at her and telling her that she couldn't do something. And she decided not to listen to that voice in that moment and take a break and take care of herself so that she could continue doing the hard task that she was doing. And I loved that so much. And I'm not trying to cast any aspersion or despair on old white men, but I also really, really, really am okay with acknowledging that there is age privilege, there is white privilege, there is male cisgender privilege. And so many of us have experienced this loud, shouting, judging voice, this, projection of shame onto ourselves for Again, something that we did as learners or, sometimes as attendings. The culture of medicine has been old white man shouting at us. Now, sometimes it was not an old man. Sometimes it was not a white man. Sometimes it was not a man, right? But that legacy of the old white man shouting at us has been passed down to others. And it is, I don't know, it's kind of an innate privilege of the teachers, right, that we really need to do away with. Let's get rid of that. I'm not going to spend the whole episode talking about that. But if you find yourself frequently, cringing, being fearful, second guessing yourself, judging yourself, going into a shame spiral about something that didn't go right or well, some mistake that happened, something where the outcome was bad, even if you didn't have a say in it, but you feel like it's your responsibility because, again, that has been part of the culture. This is a moment to acknowledge that that is deeply ingrained and something that we are trying to undo. The culture of shame and self-judgment is so deeply entrenched in so many of us. And we think it's helpful because we think it keeps us on the right path, but really it keeps us feeling just terrible and fearful all the time. And that is actually not a great way to practice medicine and have a career. So again, I'm not going to spend the whole episode talking about that, but I do want to acknowledge that that is a very real part. And this tool of knowing what I now know is one of the ways that we can start to change that. Okay, so let's dive in. Actually, before I dive in, I also want to mention Maya Angelou and her quote, and I should have looked this up to confirm that I get the words exactly right, but when you know better, you do better. That is a very similar statement to what might have been shouted at us, right? That we are dumb, that we didn't know what we were doing, that we're incompetent. When you know better, you do better, meaning that we are all learning all the time, that we are all gaining and gathering experiences as we go. And that is actually a wonderful thing. You had to start your journey into anything that you had to learn how to do by being a beginner. Even if you went to medical school after having been some other kind of healthcare professional, whether it was a CNA, an MA, any number of things, you still had to start your medical journey in medical school at the beginning. You didn't really get any credit. You knew some things, right? But you had to start fresh. And that's true of having learned anything, right? If you played the violin, if you played soccer, if you learned a language, you had to start at the beginning. Now, everyone's beginnings look different. Of course, they happen at different times. But as we went along, when we know better, we do better. If you were learning Spanish, you didn't know how to conjugate those verbs until you did. And when you did know, then you used it, right? When we know better, we do better. It's really helpful to have that more hopeful, positive frame of reference when we are doing this work, because otherwise we tend to judge that former part of ourselves that was a learner, that didn't know what you know now, and didn't have the experience, the tools, the resources, the insider knowledge that you now have. That person was not wrong, evil, dumb, stupid. They were just not where you are. So let's not judge that former version of ourselves. Let's just acknowledge that we're all learning and growing as we go. Okay? We're setting the old white man shouting at us aside, and we are embracing Maya Angelou and her fierce self-compassion. All right, now we will jump in. So I want us to start by doing this analysis on the current job that we have. And by that, I mean the place that you work right now, the clinic or the hospital that employs you, whether that's a big system or a small system, whether you work for yourself or other people, thinking about that thing that you are doing right now. So, not your specialty, not the profession of medicine, but the actual employment situation that you have. All right. Knowing what you now know about this particular work situation, how do you want to think about doing this job? So, when you took this role on, maybe you were a resident and moving across the country. Maybe you just switched jobs, across town. Maybe you were hired by the place that you had been a resident, right? There's lots of different ways that this looks, but that version of you that signed the contract believed certain things about this job based on what other people told you, right? Based on what other people told you that is spelled out in your written contract, based on what other people shared with you, some of it formally, right? Discussions that you had with people who were in the hiring processes, and informally, any insider information that you gained in talking to someone who works in that position or someone who left that position, whatever the case may be. You had that set of information when you took this job. But now that you've been in it for 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, your perspective has changed. And, probably some of those details have changed. We were talking a little bit last week about difficulty with employers and considering that sometimes things that were in the contract explicitly or things that were not explicitly in the contract are quite different than what you experience with boots on the ground, right? Perhaps resources that you were promised or staffing, any number of things have changed. And some of that's just normal, right? Some of that is just that things change over time and life would be fairly boring if they didn't change, right? We need to learn and grow and process and all of the things that happen to us in life create change. So we acknowledge that, but sometimes what people sold to you when they were hiring you for the job is very much in conflict with what the experience is like when you're there, right? And so I want us to sit in this space of knowing what I know now of how it is to work here, who I work with, who I do and don't have on my team, what help I am and am not able to get, the expectations of what I'm supposed to do, again, whether explicit or implicit. What are all of those circumstances? And knowing what you know now of what this job entails, again, either explicitly or implicitly, what needs to change? It's really important that we do this reflection periodically so that we are not feeling stuck, eroded, ground down, and as though we have no agency. It is very easy for that to happen to us. And so many reasons that we've talked about many, many times before why this happens. But many physicians, especially many employed physicians, are used to hearing no when they ask for help or resources or an FTE change. Many are used to not getting what they want for themselves or for the better care of patients, especially if it is perceived to decrease the number of patients who are seen or increase costs in some way. This, unfortunately, is really normal. And I think we just need to really accept that that's true. We don't need to condone it and we don't need to feel stuck. But we do need to see that the places that we work are businesses. They do need to pay rent and keep the lights on and have stashes of supplies and pay the people who are doing all of the jobs. That is true. Now, many of our healthcare systems are for profit. If they're not for profit, they're still usually bringing in a lot of revenue. They've got their business agenda, which may not be in alignment with taking the best care of patients or taking the best care of the humans, including you, who take care of the other humans. So there is a business side to things, and we need to acknowledge that. But that does not mean that we need to accept that we have no options. And it does not mean that we need to torture ourselves thinking that we can't do anything else. But again, knowing what you know now of how things are at your job, what needs to change? For some people, when we do this analysis and they really take a hard look at how much struggle, how much advocating they've done, how supportive people are or are not of them doing the right work, right? The right physician work, them having the right supports in place to allow that work to happen, them being able to have reasonable breaks during the day, during the week, during the year, right? Being able to not be on call all day, all week, all the time, being able to take vacations when they need it, being able to take CME, being able to truly be off on the weekends, right? All of those things. And so sometimes when we do this analysis, we can see that, yes, I could make improvements, but this place with the things that they are asking me to do are not reasonable. Sometimes we will reach that conclusion. And if we do, that is a good sign of, this no longer works for me. Again, as we were talking about last week, if the episode you didn't catch it was 161, dealing with difficulties with employers, something like that. We were really talking about flipping the table and evaluating our employers on their side of what they deliver for us, right? So again, if we're in that mindset, we may see that, what? I've done all of these things. Yes, again, I'll acknowledge as a human, there are things that I can do differently to take care of myself. And I will not have success in this place balancing my human needs against what they're asking me to do, right? If they're asking you to be on call 3 weekends out of 4 and work a full schedule, and that's just the way it is, and they've been trying to hire, here's my air quotes here, we've been trying to hire, but they just haven't for a year or more, they are showing you what their priorities are. Priorities and or capabilities, and they are not taking care of you, right? So sometimes we will come to that conclusion in doing this. Sometimes when we do this, we will not be at that extreme of things, but we will see, all right, well, if it's important to me to stay in this place and to work here with what I do and I don't have, then these things need to change. And sometimes those are going to be internal things, which we'll get to. Sometimes they're going to be external things. Sometimes you may need to hire more support at home. Sometimes you may need to bring in additional resources that will serve you. Again, whether you're advocating for them to come in and be hired or not, but when we are so used to hearing no, we stop asking for help. And if it's been a while since you asked for help and there's something that would be helpful, it's time to reconsider that. And that's why we do these reflections. So knowing what I know now with how things are in this employed position, whatever it may be, what needs to change? The next thing we're going to look at is the more macro level. So for your career, right? Your specialty, your season of life, the things that you have going on at home, right? In the big picture, knowing what you now know. What do you need? What lights you up that we want to elevate and add more of? What drains you? It may be that you picked a specialty that you had a huge interest in. I'm just going to pick OBGYN. You became an OBGYN because you absolutely loved supporting pregnant women throughout their pregnancies, pre pregnancy, post pregnancy. You just really love that. And now you've been doing it for a while and you've experienced what parts of it that you really love and what parts of it are just too much. They are not working well for you in the current way that you're doing it. And again, we're sort of zoomed out from the particular employer here, although of course there's overlap with this. But for example, if you love being on labor and delivery and you figured out like, yeah, this hospital is just fine, but you hate being in clinic, you might use this as an opportunity to say, knowing what I now know about who I am, what I like, what fits into my life, I think I'd rather be a labor hospitalist, right? This part is really tuning in to those parts of your career at a more macro level and seeing like, what is it that I want to do? And again, what needs to change? What do I love? What drains me? Knowing that we're never going to make it a perfect experience where we never have to do, I don't know, charting or any other obnoxious administrative task. Sorry, guys, we're probably not going to get rid of that. But thinking for yourself, what would be a great fit for me right now at the more macro level for your career? This is really, really good work to do. And it's easy that this work falls to the side as we are very tightly focused around the job question. So, this employer or what's available, kind of on the job boards as I'm doom searching for a new job because I hate this job so much. I know you guys, I know that we're doing that. I did that for so many years. Anyway, side story. When you think about your career in the big picture, what is it that you want? Knowing what you know now. So again, you may think, well, I really love or don't love clinic. Okay. Is there a way for you to shift things in your career so that you do more of what you love and less of what you don't? Is there an opportunity to change your FTE in a way that works well for you in this season of life, knowing what you know now? I remember when I was a resident and my faculty advisor, who was a delightful old white man who never yelled at me. Granted, a lot of his advice didn't necessarily apply to me because I was not an old white man. I had not raised my family. I had not done many of those things. That is, again, a side story. But when he would ask me what it was that I wanted to do, and, during residency, we had a pretty robust full scope family medicine residency practice, which meant inpatient hospital medicine. It meant, pretty excellent obstetrics training and hands-on labor and delivery experience, a lot of procedure work, right? So a really good, broad family medicine, urban experience. And he would ask me like, oh, what FTE did I think that I wanted to work? And what sorts of focuses, did I want to have? And at the time, because I was doing everything, I was like, well, of course I'll work full time. And yeah, of course I I want to do OB and I want to do hospital. I wanted to do everything. Knowing what I know now, and as I looked at all those parts along the way, that absolutely shifted, right? The desire to do hospital medicine went way down. Eventually, I decided to give up obstetrics. I did that. I practiced OB as a family medicine physician for about 10 years. There were parts of it I absolutely loved and treasured, and it was no longer fitting in my life and was causing ongoing chaos, right? So, knowing what I knew at those times, I was able to continue to refine my career based on what was working and what wasn't working. And, again, for myself, I added more specialized care, adding obesity. I'm now working on adding menopause care, right? So becoming a little bit more specialized in an outpatient, non emergency, non urgency type setting because that's what works well for me. But I couldn't have known that as a family medicine resident who was so steeped in we do it all. So that is an example of doing this analysis for your career as you move along, knowing what I know now, knowing what lights me up, what drains me or doesn't fit with this season of my life. How do I want to shift things? Okay. And then finally, and this, touches on the things that we've already discussed, but what do I need in my life knowing what I know now? Many, many of us are super hardworking people who could very easily work as much as possible, who find work in many ways easier than just being a human because of so many years of being trained in this. Um, it's not a career. It's so much more that gets pulled into us in medicine for most of us. So knowing what I know now of what this work is like, of what this identity as being a physician is like, of what I want for my career, what lights me up, what drains me, and what I need in the non-medical rest parts of my life. What do I need more of? What do I need less of? Knowing what I now know. This is asking yourself, do I need more help at home? Do I need to spend some money having other people do things for me so that I get more free time? I see so many of us really wrestle with this, and I'm in this boat, my friends, where we struggle to think about paying other people to do things that technically we can do, right? Cleaning the house is a good one. I could not conceive of this because I didn't grow up knowing anybody who had house cleaners who came. But let me tell you, when we moved into a house that had more than one bathroom and my kids were, fully potty trained, I didn't want to spend a full hour of my precious, precious free time when I wasn't doctoring and wasn't momming and wasn't passed out asleep. I didn't want to spend it cleaning all those bathrooms. We moved from a house. This is incredible privilege right here, right? We moved from a house with one bathroom, initially with two people, and then having added two more people to our family, right? To a house with four bathrooms. Now that is incredibly lovely, but it is a lot more work to clean four bathrooms than it is to clean one bathroom. And again, having only added things to my life at that point, I told my husband, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we need to hire help because I don't want to spend my precious free time doing this. And we have not looked back. That was a really hard decision for us because we don't like to spend money doing things that we know how to do. That's true of many physicians, especially if you struggled with debt from going to medical school or any prior constructs, right, that you had around money. But it was hard for us as a couple to make that adjustment. Okay, now we have the income where we could choose to spend money to buy someone else's time in cleaning our house. What is it that you need knowing what you know now? It's interesting. When I gave up my employed position in 2021, and I wasn't really working for a bit of time, and I remember asking my husband, can we still afford have the cleaners come? And he just looked at me and he's like, we are never going back to not having cleaners. And I'm like, great, fantastic. He was so thoroughly sold on the pleasures of having, a very clean, spick and span house every 2 weeks. I share that it's not my intention to say, do what I do. My intention is just to show you that many of us struggle with this. And because we know how to do so many things and we are such excellent learners. And again, many of us came into our careers with debt from medical school, maybe from college as well. We can really struggle with this. But if you spend as many hours working as you do, because I know that you're working more than 40 hours, or if you are only working 40 hours, you are being paid for less, because that is the reality of the work that we do. If that's the case, and you don't magically have more hours in your week than any of the other of us, we want to really maximize the precious time that we have that is not working, including taking care of our needs for sleep and relaxation and movement and connections with the people that we love, as well as the things that need to happen, right? We've got houses to clean, we've got groceries to buy, we've got food to prepare, we've got cars to take to the oil change. If we can get help with doing some of those tasks that do not need to be done by us, we create more time for all of those other things that are important. You don't think you have time to exercise? What if you hired somebody to pick up your groceries, clean the house? I bet you will find more time. Let's not use that time working. Okay? This is my finger pointing at you. I know you. We need to buy back our free time by hiring other people to help us. Most of us do this automatically with childcare, for example, right? We have nannies or daycares or, people in our lives, right, who are taking care of our kids. But we need to think more expansively and allow more people to help us, hire more people to help us. And when we can do that analysis, knowing what I now know and see where we need more help, my friends, you will open up freedom, time, spaciousness. Spend money hiring people to help you or automate things in a way that buys you back time and sanity. Yes, there can be a little work involved in setting those things up, in monitoring them periodically, right? Reassessing, reevaluating, making sure it's working for you. It is worth it. So I hope that this has been a really helpful way to look at where we are now and to be able to reassess what is going on in our lives in terms of our jobs, like specifically the places that we work, the employers that we work for. Again, whether that's big or small, whether you work for yourself, and really think, knowing what I now know of what this job, this work entails, what do I need to change? Looking at our careers at a more macro level, recognizing the things that we enjoy and the things that we don't enjoy. Perhaps we found that we really, really don't like patient care at all, ever. Okay, well, there are physician jobs that may use our clinical skills or may just use our amazing thinking brains, right? That you don't have to see patients, but we have to stop and do this analysis and really think, okay, what am I going to do? And then third, looking at our lives. What do I need? How can I help myself knowing what I now know about my life in this time, in this season, with this career, with these circumstances going on? I hope that that helps. And again, we are trying to do this work with self-compassion and kindness, and really just acknowledging that our lived experience is real. Our lived experience of feeling what it's like to be in this place at this time is real. If you don't like what you're experiencing, I want you to really reflect on what you enjoy, what capacity you have, what you want more of, what you want less of, and start to make some changes. This is the work that we do in coaching. This is the analysis that we do, whether we make it this explicit or not, but really trying to figure out, who am I at this stage in my life? What is it that I want? Rather than just dealing with the nitty-gritty of recovering from the week, the day, the stressor, the terrible circumstances, the catastrophe of the, US insurance-based healthcare system and all the things that are going wrong. Yes, there is, privilege in that system, and many of us have access to things using health insurance that we wouldn't have access to otherwise if we didn't have health insurance. But man, what a mess things are right now. Use this reflection tool to help you without judging your past self and the decisions that she or he made. Don't judge. Just say, aha, well, when I started here, when I started this career in this specialty, when I, got to this place in my life, my thoughts, my experience was this, but knowing what I now know, it's time for a change. My friends, take this to heart. You deserve a wonderful life. You are working so hard. You have worked so hard. You are, by nature of being here, a caring and compassionate person. And in order to maintain the special sauce of what you do and to keep working in the capacity that you do, maybe not with all the same things, but we need to take excellent care of ourselves. And I'm going to continue to beat that drum for as long as I have a voice here. Have a wonderful week. Again, I hope you will take this tool to heart and start using it in your life. And until next time, take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.